The room laughed because they thought she was just a waitress. 10 minutes later, they would realize they had underestimated the smartest person at the table. The golden lights of the prestigious Bella Vista restaurant in Manhattan reflected across crystal glasses, polished wooden tables, and the elegant suits of some of the most successful people in the city. It was a private evening reserved for international investors, business leaders, and executives who had gathered to celebrate a major partnership between American and Chinese technology companies. At the center of the room stood Ethan Whitmore, the 42-year-old billionaire CEO of Whitmore Global Technologies. His confident voice carried easily through the restaurant as he discussed global expansion, international markets, and the importance of understanding different cultures in business. Ethan was known for his sharp decisions and his ability to control any room he entered. People listened when he spoke. They respected his success. They admired the company he had built from a small startup into a global organization worth billions of dollars. Around him were investors, executives, and several Chinese business partners who had traveled thousands of miles for the important meeting. Among the staff moving quietly through the restaurant was Olivia Carter, a 26-year-old waitress who had worked at Bella Vista for nearly 2 years. She wore a clean white shirt, a fitted black apron, tailored black slacks, and polished shoes. To most guests, she was simply part of the service team. She brought drinks, arranged plates, and made sure every table received excellent attention. Few people noticed the way she listened carefully to conversations around her. Few people realized that she understood far more than anyone expected. Olivia had always believed that knowledge did not need an audience. She had learned that lesson long before working at the restaurant. While others searched for recognition, she focused on learning, improving, and helping the people around her. That evening, she quietly served a table near Ethan and his Chinese guests while they discussed a complicated business agreement. The conversation moved between English and Mandarin as the executives exchanged ideas about future opportunities. Olivia continued working without interrupting. She knew when to speak and when to remain silent. But then Ethan made a comment that changed the atmosphere. "The hardest part about international business," he said with a confident smile, "is finding people who truly understand another culture instead of just memorizing a few phrases." Several guests nodded in agreement. Ethan continued explaining how language represented discipline and dedication. "You cannot simply pick up Mandarin overnight," he said. "It takes years of commitment." One of the investors laughed lightly and mentioned that very few Americans could hold a serious conversation in Mandarin. Ethan looked around the room with a playful expression. "I would be impressed if anyone here could surprise me." A few guests smiled. It felt like a harmless challenge during an expensive dinner. Then Ethan noticed Olivia standing nearby with a tray in her hands. "Actually," he said, looking toward her, "maybe we should ask the person who has been quietly listening all evening." The attention of the entire table shifted toward Olivia. She immediately understood what was happening. Some guests looked curious. Others looked amused. They saw a waitress standing beside executives and assumed they already knew the answer before she spoke. Ethan smiled politely, not realizing the moment was about to become something completely different. "Tell me," he said, "do you happen to speak Mandarin?" The room became quiet. Olivia placed the tray down carefully and looked around at the faces watching her. She did not appear nervous. She did not appear offended. She simply remained calm. "Yes," she answered. The guests exchanged surprised looks. Ethan raised his eyebrows slightly. "You do?" Olivia nodded. "Yes, I speak Mandarin." A few people smiled, expecting a simple phrase or a basic introduction. Ethan leaned back in his chair with curiosity. "Then perhaps you can prove it." Olivia looked at him for a moment, then calmly asked, "Would you prefer a formal business conversation or a casual conversation with a native speaker?" The room stopped moving. The question was not what anyone expected. And for the first time that evening, Ethan Whitmore realized the person standing in front of him might not be who everyone thought she was. The entire restaurant seemed to pause after Olivia Carter's unexpected answer. Moments earlier, she had been standing quietly beside the table, carrying a serving tray like any other member of the restaurant staff. Now, every person around the table was looking at her with a mixture of curiosity and surprise. Ethan Whitmore leaned forward slightly, studying her expression. He had expected confidence, but he had not expected calmness. "All right," Ethan said with a polite smile. "Let us have a conversation." Olivia nodded. She did not appear nervous. She did not try to impress anyone. She simply accepted the challenge as if it were an ordinary moment. One of the Chinese executives at the table greeted her in Mandarin, expecting a simple response. Instead, Olivia answered naturally, using the same language and tone. The executive immediately looked surprised. He asked another question, this time about her background and experience with the language. Olivia responded smoothly, explaining that she had studied Mandarin for many years and had spent time learning not only the language, but also the culture behind it. The expressions around the table began to change. The guests who had been watching with amusement became more focused. They were no longer waiting for a waitress to make a mistake. They were listening to someone who clearly understood what she was saying. Ethan remained quiet for a moment. He was impressed, but he still wanted to understand how someone working in a restaurant had developed such a rare skill. That is impressive, he admitted. But speaking a language and understanding business are two different things. It was not an insult. It was a challenge. The guests looked between Ethan and Olivia, sensing that the conversation had moved beyond a simple demonstration. Olivia smiled slightly. That is true, she replied. Language is only the beginning. Understanding people is what matters most. Her answer caught everyone's attention, because it showed that she was not just repeating words. She understood the purpose of communication. One of the Chinese investors asked Olivia about a cultural difference he had noticed when working with American companies. Without hesitation, she explained how certain business conversations in China often relied more on trust, relationships, and patience before agreements were finalized. The investor nodded slowly. That is a very accurate observation, he said. Ethan looked around the table. The same guests who had expected a simple exchange were now engaged in a serious conversation. Olivia was not trying to prove anyone wrong. She was simply sharing knowledge she had gained through years of dedication. The room became quieter as everyone listened. The billionaire CEO who was used to leading conversations was now learning from someone he had almost ignored. After several minutes, Ethan asked a final question. So how did you learn all of this? Olivia looked down briefly before answering. I have always loved languages. When I was younger, I dreamed of working internationally. I studied whenever I had the opportunity. Her voice remained calm, but there was a deeper story behind her words. She explained that life had changed her plans. Responsibilities had arrived earlier than expected, and she needed a flexible job that allowed her to support her family while continuing to learn. Working at Bella Vista became the path she chose, but she never stopped studying. The guests listened carefully. The woman wearing an apron was no longer seen as just an employee serving dinner. She was someone with discipline, passion, and a story that nobody had taken the time to ask about. Ethan looked at the room and realized something important. He had entered the evening believing success was easy to recognize. He thought it came with titles, expensive suits, and impressive careers. But Olivia Carter had just shown everyone that extraordinary talent could exist anywhere. And sometimes, the greatest discoveries happened when someone finally stopped assuming they already knew the answer. The conversation at Bella Vista restaurant continued, but the atmosphere had completely changed. What began as a casual challenge had transformed into a moment of genuine curiosity. The guests who had once viewed Olivia Carter as a quiet waitress were now listening carefully to every word she spoke. Across the table, Ethan Whitmore remained silent for a moment, studying the situation with a different perspective. He had spent years meeting talented people from around the world, yet he realized he had almost missed the most interesting person in the room. Olivia continued answering questions in Mandarin with natural confidence. She discussed cultural traditions, communication styles, and the importance of understanding the meaning behind words rather than simply translating them. Her answers were thoughtful and precise. She explained that language was not only about vocabulary. It was about history, emotions, and the way people connected with each other. The Chinese executives at the table became increasingly impressed. One of them asked Olivia about a phrase that was often misunderstood when translated between English and Mandarin. Olivia smiled and explained the deeper meaning behind it, describing how the same sentence could carry different feelings depending on the situation and relationship between people. The executive nodded with admiration. You understand more than the language, he said. You understand the culture. Those words created a quiet moment around the table. Ethan looked at Olivia differently now. The person he had assumed needed to prove herself had already demonstrated something far beyond his original challenge. She was not simply someone who memorized phrases. She was someone who had invested years developing a skill with patience and dedication. Still, Ethan was known for his competitive nature. He believed in testing ideas, questioning assumptions, and searching for deeper answers. "I have one more question," he said. Olivia looked at him calmly. "Of course." Ethan turned toward one of his Chinese business partners and asked about a difficult negotiation topic involving international partnerships. It was not a simple language exercise anymore. He wanted to understand whether Olivia truly understood the world she was discussing. The room became quiet again. Everyone waited. Olivia thought carefully before answering. Then she began explaining her perspective in Mandarin, discussing the importance of trust, patience, and long-term relationships in international business. She connected cultural understanding with practical communication strategies. The answer was not just correct. It showed maturity and experience. The executives exchanged impressed looks. One of them asked if Olivia had ever worked in international business before. She shook her head gently. "Not professionally," she answered, "but I have always studied it." Ethan noticed something important. Olivia never spoke with arrogance. She never tried to embarrass him. She never used the moment to make anyone feel smaller. She simply shared what she knew. That humility made her talent even more remarkable. Around the restaurant, other guests had begun noticing the unusual conversation. People who had been focused on their own dinners were now watching quietly as a waitress discussed international communication with executives and business leaders. The contrast was impossible to ignore. Olivia stood there wearing a simple black apron, while everyone around her wore expensive suits and designer clothing. Yet the most valuable knowledge in the room was coming from the person many people had overlooked. Ethan finally smiled. "I have to admit, I did not expect this." Olivia responded politely. Most people do not expect what they have never taken the time to discover. The sentence stayed with everyone at the table. It was not a criticism. It was a reminder. Because the biggest mistake people make is often not failing to recognize talent. It is assuming they already know where talent can be found. And that night, inside one of Manhattan's most exclusive restaurants, an entire room began questioning what they thought they knew. The evening at Bella Vista restaurant continued long after the original challenge had ended, but nobody at the table was interested in returning to ordinary conversation. What had started as a simple moment of entertainment had become something much more meaningful. The guests who had gathered to discuss business deals and international partnerships were now focused on a different kind of discovery. They were learning about the person they had almost ignored. Olivia Carter stood calmly beside the table, still wearing her white shirt and black apron, answering questions with the same patience and professionalism she had shown throughout the entire evening. She did not act like someone trying to prove a point. She acted like someone sharing knowledge with people who genuinely wanted to learn. Ethan Whitmore watched closely. The billionaire CEO had built his reputation by recognizing opportunities before others did. He had invested millions of dollars into companies because he believed he could see potential hidden beneath the surface. Yet tonight, he realized he had failed to apply that same thinking to the people around him. He had seen a waitress. He had not seen the years of dedication behind the uniform. One of the Chinese executives at the table asked Olivia a more personal question. "Your Mandarin is exceptional. Where did you study?" Olivia smiled softly before answering. She explained that her interest began when she was a teenager. She had always been fascinated by languages and the way communication connected people from different backgrounds. While many students focused only on required classes, she spent her free time studying Mandarin through books, online lessons, and conversations with native speakers. Her dedication continued for years. She practiced pronunciation, learned cultural history, and studied how language reflected the values of the people who spoke it. The guests listened carefully. Her story was not about natural talent alone. It was about commitment. Ethan leaned forward slightly. "So you taught yourself?" he asked. Olivia nodded. "A lot of it, yes. But learning a language is never something you do completely alone. There were many people who helped me along the way." Her answer surprised him. She gave credit to others instead of taking all the recognition for herself. That small detail revealed as much about her character as her language ability revealed about her intelligence. Another guest asked Olivia if she had ever considered a career using her skills professionally. The question created a brief silence. Olivia looked down for a moment before responding honestly. She explained that she had once planned to pursue international studies. She had dreamed about working with organizations that connected people across countries. However, life had changed her plans. Family responsibilities required her attention, and she chose a path that allowed her to support the people she loved while continuing to learn whenever she could. Sometimes life changes the route, she said, but that does not mean the destination disappears. The word stayed with everyone at the table. Ethan looked around the restaurant and noticed something he had never considered before. Many people were carrying stories, abilities, and dreams that remained invisible because nobody asked about them. The room that had once been focused on a $100,000 challenge was now focused on a much bigger lesson. A person's current position did not define their full potential. As the evening continued, Ethan asked Olivia one final question. "Why did you never tell anyone you could do this?" Olivia smiled gently. "Because I was never waiting for someone to notice. I just enjoyed learning." That answer affected him more than any impressive demonstration could have. In a world where many people worked hard to be seen, Olivia had worked hard simply because she valued growth. The executives at the table no longer saw a waitress standing beside them. They saw someone with discipline, intelligence, and a perspective that could not be measured by a job title. And Ethan Whitmore understood that the most surprising discoveries often happen when people stop looking for greatness in expected places. The conversation inside Bella Vista restaurant had changed the way everyone at the table viewed the evening. What began as a simple challenge had become a lesson about assumptions, dedication, and the hidden stories people carried with them. The $100,000 wager that once seemed like entertainment no longer mattered. The real value of the moment was something nobody expected to discover. Ethan Whitmore sat quietly for a few seconds, looking at Olivia Carter with a different kind of curiosity. He was used to meeting people who wanted something from him. Many approached him because of his company, his wealth, or his influence. They prepared carefully before speaking with him, hoping to impress him or gain an opportunity. Olivia was different. She had never tried to attract attention. She had not mentioned her abilities until someone questioned them. She had not used her knowledge to make others feel smaller. She simply answered honestly when asked. That was what made her stand out. One of Ethan's business partners smiled and said, "You know, the most impressive part is not that you speak Mandarin. It is that you understand the people behind the language." Olivia thanked him politely. She explained that every language represented more than words. It carried traditions, memories, values, and ways of thinking that developed over generations. She believed learning a language meant learning how to see the world from another person's perspective. Ethan listened carefully because he recognized a principle he often used in business. The most successful companies were not built by people who only understood numbers. They were built by people who understood people. For the first time that night, he saw that same quality in someone he had never expected to notice. As dinner continued, the conversation shifted from language to global business. Several executives asked Olivia about cultural differences they had experienced during international meetings. She answered thoughtfully, explaining that successful communication required patience and respect before negotiation. She described how misunderstandings often happen not because people lacked intelligence, but because they viewed situations through different experiences. Her observations were simple, yet they carried the depth of someone who had spent years studying human behavior. Ethan looked around the table and noticed something unusual. The executives who normally competed to share their opinions were now listening. The billionaire CEO, who was usually the person guiding conversations, was now learning from someone else. It was a rare experience for him. "I have to admit something," Ethan finally said. "When I first asked you that question, I thought I already knew the answer." Olivia looked at him calmly. "Most people do," she replied. "It is easy to understand what we can see. It takes more effort to understand what we cannot." Her response created a quiet moment around the table. Nobody laughed. Nobody treated it as a clever comeback. Instead, everyone recognized the truth behind her words. Ethan thought about all the times he had made quick judgments throughout his career. In business, fast decisions were often necessary. But he realized there was a difference between being decisive and being certain without understanding. One of the Chinese executives complimented Olivia and asked if she would consider working in international business someday. She smiled and thanked him, saying she was grateful for the opportunity to continue learning wherever life took her. Her answer reflected the same humility she had shown from the beginning. She was not trying to escape who she was. She was simply open to what came next. As the evening approached its end, Ethan stood from the table and looked at the room around him. The restaurant was still filled with successful people, expensive clothing, and impressive achievements. But the person who had created the most memorable moment was the woman wearing a simple black apron. For the first time in a long time, Ethan Whitmore realized that wealth could open doors, but knowledge, kindness, and humility were what truly changed the way people saw each other. The evening at Bella Vista restaurant slowly came to an end, but the conversation that changed everything continued to stay in Ethan Whitmore's mind. As guests finished their meals and prepared to leave, the atmosphere no longer felt like a formal business gathering. It felt like a moment of discovery. People who had arrived expecting to discuss investments and contracts had witnessed something far more valuable. They had discovered a person whose abilities had been hidden behind a simple uniform. Olivia Carter returned to her responsibilities after the conversation, collecting glasses and making sure other guests were taken care of. She did not act differently because of the attention she received. She did not walk with pride or expect special treatment. She continued doing her job with the same focus and kindness she had shown before anyone knew about her language skills. Ethan noticed that detail more than anything else. Many people became different when they received recognition. Olivia remained exactly the same. Before leaving the restaurant, Ethan approached the manager and asked about Olivia. He wanted to understand more about the person behind the talent he had witnessed. The manager smiled and explained that Olivia had always been one of the most reliable employees at Bella Vista. She arrived early, helped new staff members learn their responsibilities, and treated every guest with respect regardless of their background. She is the kind of person who makes everyone around her better, the manager said. Ethan listened carefully. Those words stayed with him because they represented a quality he valued in business but rarely saw in everyday life. Leadership was not only about making decisions. It was about creating a positive impact on the people around you. Later that night, Ethan sat in the back of his private car as it moved through the streets of Manhattan. The city lights passed by the window, but his thoughts remained on the conversation at dinner. He remembered the moment he looked at Olivia and assumed he knew what she could do. He remembered the confidence behind his challenge and the quiet surprise when she answered effortlessly. For years, Ethan had built his success by evaluating opportunities quickly. He studied companies, analyzed markets, and made decisions based on limited information. Those skills had helped him become successful. But that night reminded him that people were not businesses. A person's value could not be calculated from a first impression. The next morning, Ethan arrived at his office earlier than usual. He reviewed several company reports before calling his leadership team. He wanted to discuss a new idea. He believed his company needed to do more to recognize talent beyond traditional backgrounds and professional titles. He explained that intelligence, creativity, and dedication could exist anywhere. His executives were surprised because Ethan had always focused heavily on measurable achievements and formal experience. Now he wanted to create opportunities for people whose abilities might not be visible on a resume. Meanwhile, Olivia continued her normal routine. She worked her shifts, studied during her free time, and continued improving her language skills. She did not know that a short conversation at a dinner table had influenced the thinking of one of the most powerful business leaders in the country. To her, it was simply another moment where she shared something she loved. But to Ethan, it became a reminder that the world was full of overlooked talent. He realized that the greatest discoveries were not always found through searches, interviews, or expensive research. Sometimes they appeared in ordinary places, carried by people who never expected anyone to notice. And the most important question was not whether talent existed. It was whether people were willing to look beyond what they saw first. The days following the evening at Bella Vista restaurant brought a quiet change to Ethan Whitmore. Nothing about his appearance suggested anything was different. He still arrived at his Manhattan office wearing perfectly tailored suits. He still attended important meetings, reviewed financial reports, and made decisions that affected thousands of employees around the world. To everyone watching from the outside, he was the same billionaire CEO who had built a global company through determination and ambition. But inside, something had shifted. Ethan began paying closer attention to the people around him. He started noticing the employees who rarely spoke during meetings, the team members whose ideas were overlooked because they did not have impressive titles, and the individuals who worked behind the scenes to keep everything running smoothly. He realized that for years, he had searched for exceptional talent in the most obvious places: elite universities, executive offices, professional networks. But Olivia Carter had shown him that talent did not always announce itself. Sometimes it simply waited for someone to ask the right question. A few weeks later, Ethan returned to Bella Vista restaurant for another business dinner. This time, he arrived earlier than usual. He did not come with a challenge or a business request. He came because he wanted to have a genuine conversation. When Olivia approached the table, she greeted him professionally, just as she had greeted countless guests before. Ethan smiled and thanked her for the lesson she had unknowingly given him. Olivia looked surprised. She had not expected someone like Ethan Whitmore to remember a conversation that seemed ordinary to her. "I wanted to ask you something," Ethan said. "Why did you never tell people about your abilities?" Olivia paused for a moment. She looked toward the busy restaurant, where servers moved between tables and guests enjoyed their evening. "Because I never thought my job made my knowledge less valuable," she answered. "And I never thought my knowledge made my job more valuable. They are simply different parts of who I am." Ethan listened carefully. Her response stayed with him because it revealed a confidence that did not depend on recognition. Olivia did not need people to know she spoke Mandarin. She did not need applause or attention. She found meaning in learning because she genuinely enjoyed it. That perspective was something Ethan rarely encountered in his world of constant competition. During their conversation, Ethan learned more about Olivia's journey. She told him about the years she spent studying languages late at night after work. She described the notebooks filled with vocabulary, the conversations with native speakers, and the patience required to improve little by little. She explained that progress was not about becoming impressive overnight. It was about showing up every day and continuing to grow. Ethan recognized the same principle that had helped him build his company. The difference was that Olivia had applied it without seeking wealth or recognition. Before leaving, Ethan made her an offer. He invited her to participate in a new leadership and cultural communication program his company was developing. He wanted employees from different backgrounds to share their experiences and perspectives. Olivia appreciated the opportunity, but she asked for time to think about it. Ethan respected that answer. Years earlier, he might have expected immediate acceptance because of his position. Now, he understood that respect meant allowing people to make their own choices. As he walked out of the restaurant that night, Ethan looked back once more. Olivia was already serving another table, smiling and helping guests as if nothing extraordinary had happened. But Ethan knew better. The woman wearing a simple apron had changed the way he viewed success. She had reminded him that the greatest abilities are often hidden behind ordinary appearances, and the people who deserve recognition are not always the ones standing in the spotlight. Months after the evening that changed the way Ethan Whitmore viewed talent, the idea that began with one conversation at Bella Vista restaurant started becoming a reality. Ethan had spent years building a company known for innovation, but he realized that innovation was not only created by technology or financial investments. It was created by people with unique experiences, different perspectives, and ideas that often remained unheard. The new cultural communication program at Whitmore Global Technologies officially launched with one simple goal: to discover and support talented individuals from every background. Ethan wanted employees to understand that knowledge was not limited to certain positions or certain paths. A person's current role did not define the full story of who they could become. When Olivia Carter was invited to speak at the first company event, she was hesitant. She had never imagined standing in front of executives and employees at a global company. She was comfortable helping people one table at a time at Bella Vista restaurant. She did not see herself as a speaker or someone others would look to for inspiration. But Ethan encouraged her to share her experience, not because of her language ability alone, but because of the mindset behind it. On the day of the event, Olivia stood in front of hundreds of employees. She wore a professional outfit while still carrying the same humility she had always shown. As she looked across the room, she saw people from different departments, different backgrounds, and different stages of their careers. She began by saying that talent was often hidden because people were too quick to decide what someone could or could not do. She shared how many people had only seen her as a waitress, but nobody had asked about the years she spent learning, studying, and growing. Her message was not about proving others wrong. It was about encouraging people to believe in their own potential. Ethan watched from the audience. He noticed that the room was completely focused on her words. The same way guests at Bella Vista had listened that night, employees were now listening with genuine interest. Olivia did not speak like someone searching for admiration. She spoke like someone who wanted others to recognize their own value. After the event, several employees approached her. Some shared stories about skills they had developed outside of work. Others talked about dreams they had postponed because they believed those dreams did not fit their current situation. Olivia listened to each person carefully, offering encouragement and reminding them that growth could happen at any stage of life. Ethan observed those conversations and understood something important. Leadership was not always about having the loudest voice in the room. Sometimes leadership was about creating space for other people to be heard. Over time, the program expanded. Employees who had never considered sharing their abilities began contributing ideas. People from different departments started collaborating in new ways. Ethan saw changes not only in the company culture, but also in himself. He became more patient. He asked more questions. He listened before making decisions. The billionaire CEO who once believed he could identify success instantly had learned that true potential required curiosity and humility. Meanwhile, Olivia continued working toward her own goals. She returned to her studies and explored opportunities connected to international communication. She remained grateful for every opportunity, but she never forgot the lesson that started everything. Recognition was meaningful, but personal growth was even more valuable. Looking back, Ethan realized the $100,000 challenge was never about money. It was about a moment when an assumption was replaced by understanding. A moment when someone in a simple apron reminded an entire room that greatness does not always arrive wearing a suit. Sometimes, it arrives quietly, waiting for someone to finally notice. Years after the night that changed everything, Ethan Whitmore still remembered the moment he realized he had been looking in the wrong places for greatness. He had spent decades building a billion-dollar company, meeting talented executives, and searching for people who could help shape the future. But the person who changed his perspective was not introduced through a business meeting, a professional network, or an impressive title. She was a waitress who quietly carried a tray through a restaurant and happened to reveal a level of knowledge nobody expected. Olivia Carter never became a different person because people finally noticed her. She remained the same thoughtful, hardworking woman who believed that learning was valuable even when nobody was watching. She continued developing her language skills, continued helping others, and continued moving forward with the same humility that had impressed everyone from the beginning. The attention she received never became the reason she worked hard. Growth itself was always her motivation. Ethan, however, carried the lesson with him every day. The experience changed the way he led his company and the way he viewed the people around him. Before that evening, he often looked for potential through traditional signs of success. He valued experience, education, and professional achievements because those were easy to measure. But Olivia showed him that some of the most important qualities could not be found on a resume. Curiosity, discipline, patience, and determination were often developed quietly over years. They existed in people who might never receive recognition unless someone took the time to notice. At a company celebration, several years later, Ethan invited Olivia to speak once again. This time, the audience included employees from every level of the organization. As she stepped onto the stage, she looked across the room and remembered the person she had been before anyone knew her story. She remembered working long shifts, studying late at night, and believing that every small effort mattered. She told the audience that success was not always about reaching a certain position or receiving approval from others. Sometimes success was simply refusing to stop learning. Ethan listened from the front row. He smiled because he understood how much had changed. The man who once believed he could recognize talent instantly had learned to become a better listener. He had learned that leadership was not about being the smartest person in every room. It was about creating opportunities for smart people to be discovered. After the speech, Ethan and Olivia stood together near the entrance of the building. Outside, the city lights of Manhattan reflected across the streets, creating a familiar scene that reminded them of where the journey began. Ethan looked at Olivia and said, "That night, I thought I was giving you a chance to prove yourself. I was wrong. You gave me a chance to see differently. Olivia smiled and replied, "Sometimes people do not need someone to tell them what they are worth. They just need someone willing to see it." Those words stayed with him, because the greatest lesson was never about the money, the challenge, or the attention that followed. It was about understanding that every person carries a story that cannot be discovered through appearance alone. A uniform does not define intelligence. A position does not define potential. And a first impression does not define a person's future. Ethan had entered that restaurant believing he understood success. He left knowing that true success also required humility, respect, and the willingness to recognize greatness wherever it appeared. Because sometimes the person standing quietly in the background is the one who teaches everyone else how to see.